Hello, we are going to read in the second part of the Making Mean lesson a biography about Beatrix Potter. Now, again, a biography is a true or nonfiction story about a person's life, but is written by a different person. So, this was not written by Beatrix Potter, that would be an autobiography. This is a biography about Beatrix Potter written by Alexandra Wallner. Oh, and Beatrix Potter, she was actually born in 1866, which was over 150 years ago. And her books are still in print, just like the one we read about the tale of Peter Rabbit, although she wrote many more stories. Okay. Helen Beatrix Potter was born in London, England on July 28, 1866. She was the first child of her parents, Rupert and Helen Potter. Her brother Bertram was born 5 years later. Like many children in wealthy English families, Beatrix and Bertram didn't see much of their parents. They were left in the care of their governesses, which is kind of like a nanny. Instead of going to school, they had their lessons at home. They hardly saw other children. Occasionally, their parents allowed them to play with cousins. Okay. Beatrix and Bertram were lonely. They spent a lot of time drawing and painting flowers and animals. Their many pets became their only friends. Without the adults knowing, they hid rabbits, frogs, lizards, newts, snakes, salamanders, bats, mice, and a turtle. Even after their pets died, they saved the skeletons and drew the bones. Beatrix was especially fond of her two pet mice named Hunca Munca and Apply Dapply, and a rabbit named Peter. Alright, here is my first question for you, which is, what did you learn about Beatrix as a child? Now, I'm trying to only show you the first question because this is for a different part. So, what did you learn about Beatrix as a child? You can tell me, or you can write it down. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Mr. and Miss Potter encouraged Beatrix and Bertram to study art. Beatrix's father enjoyed photography and collected paintings. When Beatrix was old enough, he took her to museums. He introduced her to John Everett Malleus, a famous painter, who showed her his studio. Thanks to her father, Beatrix saw how an artist lived and worked. In the summers, Beatrix went to Scotland with her family. The Potters rented different houses near the woods. Beatrix kept a diary written in her own code. The sights and sounds of the woods were like magic to her, and everything was romantic in my imagination. She also liked to paint wildflowers and small woodland animals. Her years of practice made her an excellent painter. Alright, here's my second question, which is, what happened in Beatrix's life that made her interested in painting? So you can tell me, or write it down, or say it out loud. When Beatrix was 17, her parents sent Bertram to boarding school. Now she was lonelier than ever. Her mother hired Annie Carter to be her companion. Now, companion is another way to say friend. Annie was only 3 years older than Beatrix. It was the first time Beatrix had a girlfriend. She loved Annie and enjoyed her company, But 2 years later, Annie got married and moved away. So her parents hired a friend to come essentially hang out with Beatrix Walsh because she was so lonely. Beatrix was alone again. She wrote, "I cannot rest. I must draw. When I have a bad time come over me, it is a stronger desire than ever." Bad times came over her often. Throughout her life, she had periods of bronchitis and rheumatic fever which left her heart weak. Her mother and father were strict. As Beatrix grew older, she wished she could make her own decisions. Beatrix got a pet rabbit and named him Bounce. She painted him from all angles wearing human clothes, as if he were a person. A greeting card company bought some of these paintings. They are published along with some verses in a booklet called A Happy Pair. But the money she earned from that was not enough to support herself. She still had to live with her parents. One night, when Beatrix was particularly lonely and there was no one to talk to, she wrote a letter to a little boy named Noel. Noel was the son of her former companion, Annie Carter. "Dear Noel, I don't know what to write to you, so I shall tell you a story about 4 little rabbits whose names are Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter." She wrote the first version of the Tale of Peter Rabbit, although she didn't know it at the time. She didn't think about writing other stories because she was more interested in making drawings and keeping notes on science. When Beatrix was in her 20s, she painted the mushrooms she had collected in Scotland during her summer vacations. She had learned a great deal about them. She noted in her diary that rooted mushrooms might be used in cancer research. Beatrix wanted to publish a report and sell 300 paintings of mushrooms she had completed. Sadly, her research was not taken seriously. Because she lived at a time when men considered themselves experts in the studies of science, her work was not accepted. Beatrix was hurt because she felt she knew more about mushrooms than almost anyone in England. Again, Beatrix turned to animals for comfort. She borrowed the letter she had written to Noel, rewriting the story about the 4 little rabbits. Alright, my next question, is what happened in Beatrix's life that helped her get the idea for the tale of Peter Rabbit? So, what happened in Beatrix's life that helped her get the idea for the tale of Peter Rabbit? Although she sent it to several publishers, no one wanted it. Beatrix did not give up. In 1901, she decided to have 250 copies of the story printed herself. She gave them to her friends. The rest she left at local bookstores. She was encouraged when they quickly sold out. An editor at Frederick Warne Publishers saw one of the books. He wanted her to make the drawings larger and rewrite the story. Beatrix was excited. She agreed to rewrite the text, but she would not enlarge the pictures. The books needed to be small, she told him, so that children's hands could hold them easily. Beatrix got her way, and The Tale of Peter Rabbit was published in 1902, when Beatrix was 36 years old. The book was very popular and made a lot of money for her. In 1905, Beatrix bought Hilltop Farm in the rural district in the rural Lake District of England. But Beatrix remained living at home because that was expected of an unmarried daughter. When she could get away from her parents, she stayed at Hilltop and wrote tales of mice, rabbits, squirrels, foxes, cats, dogs, and farm animals. She remembered how lonely she had been as a child. Animals had always made her feel better. She wanted to write about her animal friends for other lonely children. She wrote of a pet hedgehog named Mrs. Tiddlywinkle and a pet duck named Jemima Puddle Duck. When Beatrix wasn't writing, she tended her garden and took care of her animals. She kept cows, sheep, pigs, and chickens. Finally, Beatrix was doing what she wanted and was happy. Beatrix sent her stories to Norman Warren, who was now her editor. They wrote many letters to each other. After a while, they fell in love. In 1905, Norman proposed to Beatrix. Although her parents did not want her to marry, she accepted. But she never married Norman. Suddenly, he became sick and died. Beatrix was very sad. She spent a lot of time writing more stories. All of her books were very popular. In 1909, Beatrix bought another farm called Castle Cottage. During her purchase, she met a lawyer named William Heelis. They both enjoyed animals and farming. They fell in love and were engaged in 1912. Again, Mr. and Mrs. Potter disapproved. Even so, in 1913, Beatrix married William and they moved to Castle Cottage. Beatrix was happy with William. She wasn't lonely anymore. After their marriage, she hardly wrote and painted at all. Her eyesight was getting weak, and she preferred spending her time with her animals and farming. Beatrix bought many surrounding farms and turned the houses into museums. She also wanted to keep the woods and fields the way they were, so she had footpaths created for tourists who visited the lakes. This way, they would not step on the wildflowers and disturb the small animals in their homes. As Beatrix grew older, she spent most of her time raising Herdwick sheep. They won many prizes at the local county fairs. The Herdwick Sheep Breeders Association elected her as their first and only woman president. Beatrix died on December 22, 1943, at the age of 77. She had written 23 tales and other books which were read by children around the world. Even though Beatrix was famous, she remained private and modest. If I have done anything, even a little, to help small children on the road to enjoy and appreciate honest, simple pleasures, I've done a bit of good, she said. And that is the biography of Beatrix Potter. So, my last question for you, is what was the most surprising or interesting thing that you learned about Beatrix Potter? All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to the tale of, or the biography of Beatrix Potter, and listening to the tale of Peter Rabbit. Thank you.